What we're going to do now is thread the sewing machine. We're going to start with the lower looper thread. So load your thread under the thread stand. Make sure your thread stand eyelets are directly above the thread, not feeding on an angle. Also, with your thread guide in the front bar, make sure that it's in line with the machine. So bring the thread up through the eyelet, through the thread guide bar. Now you're going to start going through the thread guides that the actual tension assembly is on. From here, we're going to go to our thread tension assembly. Now on the top here, you have 2 holes for each thread. These are called uncurling devices. So if you take it around like this and put it through, if there's any curl in the thread, it takes it out. But if you're not having a thread that's prone to curling, I usually don't wrap it around because it causes too much tension in some threads. So I just put it through once. Then you have to come through the back. So we're going to go from back to front. Then we're going to go from front to back. Okay. Now we're going to go through your eyelet just before you go through the tension assembly. So now what I'm going to do is bring it up on the other side to the second eyelet on the other side of the tension assembly. And then I'm just going to make sure that it fits in between the 2 tension discs. So what I'm going to do now is pull down the front cover, slide back the top plate. Now there's a button right here that you push, and this allows the guide for the looper thread cam take up, which is under here, to be clear for you to pass the thread through, because you really can't thread it when it's down. It's really hard to thread. So you just push the button and it comes up. So I'm going to start by, there's an eyelet right here. Okay, now hold on to the thread and bring the thread under this guide, like this. Now, as you can see the groove right here, the thread fits in the groove underneath this. You don't have to thread through this eyelet because there's a cutout in it, but you do have to go under and between the tension disc. The second one, loop it in through the first one, and then just take your thread, put it in between the discs, and when you pull it, it will just fall in place. So now from here, what you have to do is push this button right here, and this device comes up. Now this is for the cam thread take up for the looper. And you can see there's an eyelet here, and then there's a slot here that the thread has to go through. So you're going to take the thread, put it through the first eyelet, put it through the slot, put it directly through the second eyelet, give it a pull. So now what we're going to do is go to the looper. And you have to make sure the looper is all the way to the right by moving the hand wheel. So go through the end of the looper, and you can see the thread is coming up through the looper here. Now, as it comes through the looper, you can see there's a slot here and an eye on the end of the looper. So you always run the thread in the slot of the looper, which means you're now going to thread the looper from front to back and pull it through securely. we're going to leave this device up until we're actually ready to start sewing. This way the cam, as we're turning the machine, won't actually make contact with the thread. It's very easy to put back in place. You just push it down. But for now, we're just going to leave it up till we get the rest of the machine threaded. So what we're going to do now is load the needle threads. So bring your thread straight up to the thread bar eyelet, to the thread bar post. Now it's the third one from the left, okay? We're not doing this one yet because that's for the spreader, which I'm going to do last. Pull it down through, and again, with these eyelets, it's the third one from the left that we're using, not the fourth. That's going to be blank for now. So bring it down through. Now we're going to go to our third tension assembly from the top, which is going to be our left-hand needle. Okay, first eyelet we go through, then we're going to come up through the tension post eyelet on the other side. Now holding on to the thread, bring it in between the discs and make sure it's secured in between the discs. You can see it here. Now what we're going to do is lift this flap up, and there's an eyelet in the front and an eyelet in the back we need to go to. Now this is for silicone oil. If you're running synthetic thread with synthetic material that doesn't absorb oil, you might want to use it for heat. But if you're using any kind of material that will absorb oil or show oil, you don't want to use this. This is just a cooling device for synthetic threads. So go through your first eyelet facing towards the machine. Second eyelet going through your first post. Give yourself some slack on the thread. Now you can see there is a take up lever here with 3 eyes in it. So you're going to go to the one that is away from the machine, closest to the operator. Okay, now you can see that our take-up bar here is at its top. If it's not, then again, just turn the hand wheel so all these eyelets are accessible and thread through the eyelet on the left like this. Now what we're going to do at this point is thread the other 2 needle threads instead of taking this thread all the way down. Because if we take it all the way down, it might actually start to interfere with each other while we're threading the needle. Okay, so I'll just do this quickly. Again, even if you want to take it over the top of the tension assembly, putting the thread through, it doesn't matter because you can shift the thread around at the end, give it a tug, and it goes between the discs. Now you're going through the middle eyelet in the front, the middle eyelet in the back, and now you are going through this post. Now what all these posts and levers do, like these posts, this lever that goes up and down, this lever that goes up and down, it feeds thread into the stitch. So how these are positioned can make the stitch tighter or looser. So if you have a longer stroke or a higher position on the posts, it can increase the amount of thread going to the stitch, which makes the thread looser in the stitch. It makes the stitch appear looser. And as you shorten the strokes or lower the bars, like if we were to lower these bars, then it would actually make your stitch a little tighter. But it's very important that you kind of understand what you're doing by adjusting these, because it can cause a problem of skipping, or you'll never get your stitch to what you want it to be for certain fabrics. So I would really advise just to leave the machine set the way it is. Because it will be set to do quite a variety of work for any of your needs. And through this top eyelet, now we've got all our threads up to our take-up bar on the top. Now I'm going to have to shift to the other side. So now what we're going to want to do is start coming down here into the needles. Now, the inside thread right here, which is this one, is for your right hand needle. So your second one, your middle thread, is for your middle needle. Now you need to thread your middle needle first, okay? Because it's going to go to right in here. And the reason we do that, because if you thread the outside needle first and then you thread the middle one, the threads are going to cross, and it can cause skipping. It just can cause you a whole bunch of issues. Okay, so this is our middle thread. So it's a little tricky with all the guards and everything in your way when you're threading it, but I would really strongly advise not to remove the guards. They're there for your safety. They can be a little bit of an inconvenience, but they can also be a very great help to you if something happens to go not the way it's supposed to. So again, we're going to go through these tension discs. Okay, so your middle one's on the inside first. Now the right needle is here. Now we're going to go through needle bar eyelet lower. Okay, now we're going to thread our needle on the right side from front to back, as all the needles are threaded that way. Okay, so now we're going to thread our left hand needle. And this will just go through, there's only one thread now on the left side of this pretension. So what that pretension does, this little spring, it just kind of supports the thread as you're sewing, because there's a long distance between thread supports, like your eyelets from here, and the thread has a tendency to flop around a little bit. So this is what that pretension is for. It's just to support the thread. If it wasn't there, it could probably run without it. But it is definitely a help. Okay, so now I'm going to have to move my needles up. Cut my thread again to get a clean cut. when you're cutting your thread, cut it on a bit of an angle, like a half a spearhead, like a chevron or something. Okay, so you're going to thread from front to back. And the machine is threaded. So now what we're going to do, push this device down, and we're going to sew a stitch in some material. Then we're going to put our cover seam thread in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just start closing up all the stuff that we opened. So if you notice here on our top needle bar take-up, the thread is on the outside of this bracket, but on the inside when it's coming down. That's because when it's lowered and raised by rotating the machine, it actually has something to do with feeding material, thread into the material to form the loop, and I'll explain that to you later. So, push down our mechanism, and remember, it locks in, okay? This front cover just slips in, and there's a slide plate on the top that just slides over. Now, we're all good. So, I'm going to lift the foot. I'm going to put a piece of material right under it, and I'm going to just do a couple of hand stitches just to start it. And I'm going to see how the thread's moving. Everything looks good. So now I'm going to turn the machine on. I'm going to give it a moment to initialize. I'm getting my rotation. Now I'm going to slowly start to sew. Okay, so I have excess thread here from where we threaded the machine. I'm going to cut it off just so it doesn't get wrapped around anything. As you can see, it's sewing very good. Now, this is a 3-thread machine, 3-needle machine. This machine can run with 1, 2, or 3 needles. So your 6.4 gauge is from left to right needle. That's your farthest distance between your needles. You can take out either a left or right needle and make it a 3.2 millimeter gauge. Or you can take out the center needle and just use it as a 6.4 with 2 needles. So you can either take out the center or one of the left-right needles, have a smaller gauge as you're sewing. So what we're going to do now is thread the cover seam, and I'd like you to note that as long as you have any 3 or 2 needles in this machine, you can use the cover seam, but you can't use the cover seam on one needle. So what we're going to do now is thread the upper spreader. Again, we're going to thread stand eyelet bar. Down to the uncurling mechanism. Again, we're not curling it through, we're just going through one. So, back to front. Front to back. Down through the eyelet before the tension assembly. Through the eyelet on the other side of the tension assembly. We're on the top of the tension assembly, so we need to hold onto the thread, line it up with the discs, hold onto the other end, give it a little pull so it sinks in between the discs. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go from the tension assembly to the fixed eyelet bar. So we go through the first eyelet, through the second eyelet. Now, what we're going to do now is go through this upper eyelet. And as you can see, as I move the hand wheel that this lever goes up and down. So what we want to do is go through this hole on the bottom of this take-up. So line it up with the holes in the eyelet and go straight across. There. So now you can see as it goes up and down, it actually pulls the thread up and down. Okay? So we're going to go through the first eyelet. We'll call this a pre-post tension. And we don't necessarily have to go through this tension disc right away. We can do this, line it up, and pull it like we did with all the other ones. Okay? Now you see this little bar sticking out and how it's lined up with this lower kidney-shaped groove straight above it. Okay? So that does help control the thread for the spreader to pick up the thread properly. So all these things have their own function. Like all the levers that go up and down make the stitch form tighter or looser. All these needle bars, eyelets, and everything else, all these eyelets that are lined up in a certain way are there for a reason and in that position for a reason. So you can see through my little tension disc, eyelets straight down, straight down, straight down to here. Now, what we have here is moving back and forth is what's called your upper spreader. So this upper spreader has a hook on the end that has to grab this thread as it goes by. Okay, so you may have to help just to feed it at the beginning. As you can see, now it's picking it up, and you can see the spreader is carrying the thread across the front of the needles. So it's going behind the first needle to the right and in front of the last needle to the left. So we now have the spreader all threaded in place, and we can sew. Also note, as long as you have the spreader thread in, you can just continuously sew and chain off, and that's your top and bottom cover seam. So also, because a lot of people do tubular work, if you actually want to take the work out in the middle because you don't want to sew off the end, push back on the treadle so the needles rise up. Give yourself some slack on the thread, lift the foot, and then just pull the thread out. And then when you've done that, cut it off. And then when you're ready to sew again, you can just lift the foot, put a piece of material under it, start to sew. And you have your cover seam and everything all intact.